Today, I have the pleasure to have with me Zack Weisfeld. Zack is a Vice President of Intel Ignite. Welcome, Zack.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
So, Zack, I think is super important just to give a quick context. Again, talking about open innovation, talking about dealing with startups, and talking about Intel. Again, Intel has made the history of something that is super recent. It's called open innovation. Again, the Intel way of innovating has been one of the things that people study in the book. If there would be a sort of bibliography of open innovation, so probably might be good just to provide to our audience a quick overview about Intel and what Intel has been the dominant approach of open innovation. And then we'll definitely focus our conversation on Intel Ignite, that is the program that you lead.
Sure. So again, great to be on this podcast or videocast. As mentioned, my name is Zack Weisfeld, and I run Intel Ignite, which is Intel's early stage startup program. And as you mentioned, Intel has been doing work with startups for many, many years and have open innovation vehicles in a variety of ways, right? Intel has probably one of the most active corporate venture funds in the world. If you look at Intel Capital, it's been around for more than 30 years, very active corporate venture fund. We have strong corporate development and business development arms that have worked with startups on licensing and finding companies for acquisition. We've made a lot of acquisitions throughout the years, and even if we go even earlier than that, a lot of people say that Intel is the company that put silicon in Silicon Valley, right? So we've been in this space for a very, very long time. The work that Ignite does is a bit of a shift in the way we operate with startups, right? And maybe I'll give a little bit of a background on myself. So I've been an entrepreneur most of my life, about 30 years building companies, startups from different areas, different from software to SaaS to hardware. 8 years in Silicon Valley, the rest in Israel. I'm in Tel Aviv now. And I used to run also Microsoft for startups. So I built the Microsoft accelerators, Bangalore, Beijing, Shanghai, Berlin, London, Paris, Seattle, Sydney, and Tel Aviv, and managed Microsoft for startups, 110 countries around the world. And in 2019, Bob Swan, the former CEO of Intel, asked me to join Intel and build something similar here. Right? How do we connect with startups in a more significant way? And, talking to corporates, I used to have this slide that shows why you have to talk to startups, and it had many logos. It had, so much of Google business is based on startup acquisitions and working with startups. So much of what Amazon is doing is based on the work with startups, Microsoft, others. I actually use one logo these days, and it's OpenAI and Microsoft. It's in the news these days, but general, it's OpenAI and then Microsoft and Google, and how it changes the pendulum for Microsoft in this fight with Google. So there's one slide, one logo that I think tells the story why corporates cannot afford not working with startups, period. There's no option. And then the question is, how do you do it in an effective way, which is not easy either. But we're probably going to talk about that later on.
So again, what you just said is super intriguing. And again, I will not open the Microsoft OpenAI because again, it's a saga that is probably it takes a while to be fully digested, and there will be multiple seasons, so I don't want to spoil how it's going to end. But again, focusing on what you just said, that corporate cannot afford to work with startups, I think Intel has been one of the trendsetter. Again, you have always been a very super open approach, and you have always considered that the best way to innovate is to interacting with startups, sometimes collaborating, sometimes acquiring them. And the next immediate question is, why Intel Ignite? Because Intel Ignite is mostly a program for supporting startups to get better, rather than providing direct immediate value to the mothership. Why such a program, and how it has been designed? But let's start with why.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I got approached a few months ago by one of the business schools in London, and apparently they've done a research for the past few years on corporate accelerators, and they figured out that most corporate accelerators fail. And when you look at them throughout the years,
now,
most
this is
of
not
them,
a surprise. Again, I
no,
have
not a
this
surprise.
feeling since a while too.
Yes. But they found that there's actually one model that from their research, and again, I was not involved in the research until they got to me. So they found one model that was consistent and worked really well. It was the Microsoft model, and then the Ignite model that is very similar because that's based on these 14 years that have built a very unique, different model. And so in their research, they figured out that this is part of that secret sauce, which is sometimes not that clear to understand. So what they found is that most of the corporate accelerator program are very transactional, right? You're going to use my cloud, I'm going to help you. You're going to buy my stuff, or you're going to resell my stuff, I'm going to help you. And we come from a very different approach of, and by the way, some of these programs take equity and take pay. We come from a very different approach. And the approach says, look, we want to connect to the best disruptors in the world. We want to create value to the best disruptors in the world. If we're not going to take equity, we're going to get access to the best disruptors in the world that may not want to give us 2%, 4%, 6%, whatever it is, but still want to get the value of working with a brand like us and getting everything we can help them with. And that connection then creates multiple business opportunities. But from the starting point is we want to work with the best disruptors, and we built a team of successful entrepreneurs, people that have built companies before, that are going to work with them. It's a very, very different approach. So when you go back to this research that the business school has done, they found that Ignite is the three fundamental things that makes Ignite different is they called it. They said there are three things. It's critical that the ability to work directly, to have this transparency, empathy, and highly effective program for their needs, right? So it's not about us; it's about them. It's about their success, and that's the key. I think the key ingredient here. So, and we can go more into the model and how it works and how it's different. But the basic fundamental issue is, how do we create value in these ecosystems around the world by engaging with the best disruptors? So Ignite is a late seed accelerator program. It's late seed means average funding for a company that comes to Ignite these days is about $7-8 million, right? And so it's not A yet. Sometimes it is A. Mostly it's between seed to A. Only 4% of the people that apply the program get accepted. So it's very hard to get accepted to the program. And it's a very intense 12-week program that we go through. And again, I'll be able to go later if you want to into the details of how do we do things differently and what they are. But it is different than most of the programs you're probably familiar with.
No, again, you made a very good point that I agree. Again, you made the model of corporate accelerators substantially failed most of the time. I also add that most of the accelerators, not just corporate, follow the same pattern, meaning they are not producing results. And again, if I have to point out one accelerator that works, is Y Combinator. It is the one. It's the one because it's able to gather the best of the best All the other are moving with the tier 2 and tier 3s and providing probably tier 3, tier 4 level programs. So again, an approach like yours that is trying obviously to gather the best early stage startups and provide them with the top-notch support is something that is super valuable. The question here is how to replicate such a thing with other corporate. You say we don't put them in contact with a bunch of corporate people, or we put them in contact with people with have a pedigree of entrepreneurial experience like yours. Again, this is the people that startup like to spend time, and so you can ask a commitment because they get the value. But again, if I have to ask you, how can replicate a program like yours elsewhere, I could say that might be a bit complicated and difficult.
Yeah, well, as I've already shown in the last 14 years, it's a repeatable model, right? I've done that in so many places around the world, very different ecosystems. And from a corporate perspective, it boils down to do you have the right people running the program? And we're going to talk about that. Do you have the right funding? As you mentioned, most accelerators, not even corporate accelerators, fail because it's hard to fund that model. Even if you're equity based, and so 1 out of 6 or 10 companies in a batch will be successful, but then you need to run for 6-7 years on your own budget until you get that exit to actually make something significant because you have small equity. So you need to have the right people to be funded properly, and then in a corporate setting you need to be sponsored properly. Hopefully by the CEO or someone below the CEO, one level below. And at Microsoft, I had Satya and then Scott Guthrie as my sponsors. And at Intel, I started as a project of the former CEO, Bob Swan. I was directly part of the CEO office. And today I report into Greg Levender, which is the CTO of Intel. So they are it's a strategic project. It's not a marketing effort. It's not a CSR effort. It's a real strategic initiative. Now, when I talk about the right people, so Ignite works in pods. So every location has 5 people that are running the program, basically. So we have today Ignite in Munich for Europe. We have Ignite in London for the UK. We have Ignite in Tel Aviv, and we have Ignite in Boston for the US. So every Ignite location has a managing director, which is always a serial entrepreneur, someone that built companies before, hired, fired, exited, went through the whole process. You have to have that person to run the program. It can't be, someone that's about to retire from the corporate and you find them the last job, or a super smart project manager that could run the program. No, it has to be a successful entrepreneur. So that's the person that runs the program. Then you have a CTO, which is a very senior technical person. It's a principal engineer or a senior principal engineer, someone that knows the company really well, knows the technologies, knows software, SaaS, system, hardware, all of the things. Then you need an ops manager that runs the day-to-day, because it's a pretty complex, we run our own sites, and we have a lot of people we engage with, a lot of mentors we engage with. So you have someone that runs the show. We have a deal flow manager that constantly looks for new deals, for new startups. As I mentioned, only 4% of people that apply get into the program. So we see about 4,000 startups a year. So there's a team of people around the world that are going through all that deal flow. And then about 12 to 18 months into the life of a pod, we add a biz dev person, a value creation person that's constantly looking for opportunities for the portfolio. Within Intel, outside of Intel, through Intel. So that's a pod, and that pod is 100% committed to the startups. Now the program has basically 4 things that the startups are going through in the 12 weeks during the program. One is a very heavy mentorship program. So you have industry mentors, which are always serial entrepreneurs from the industry, people that have been very successful in building multiple companies, and they come on board as a very active board member for 12 weeks. And some of them stay longer, but they work with the startups throughout the program on a weekly basis. You get the lead mentor from Intel that usually builds around 4 to 5 people around them, that from sales, from product, from engineering, from a variety of places. And again, on a weekly basis, work with the startups to make them successful. Then, so these are the mentorship pieces. Then second is the workshops and content. Now, we do not work with consultants. We work with practitioners that are doing things in startups. So, for example, give you examples from the program here in Tel Aviv. So the guy that does a session on product is a guy called Kostika. Kostika is the co-founder of Wiz, one of the most successful startups in Israel. He's the CPO and founder. So he does a session on product. And then he does office hours with the startups. Or Arkady, that's VP R&D of Rapid, right? He runs a session on R&D, right? So these are practitioners, people that are doing it for a living. They're not consulting to startups. This is not their job. This is something they love doing, but their day-to-day is they build successful startups. So this is the second thing. The third thing is something we call founder circle. So on a weekly basis, the companies will get together with a successful entrepreneur for about 90 minutes or a couple hours, a little bit of war stories, but mostly an intimate discussion of how they do things. So again, an example, there's a very successful startup here called Verbit. Their CEO have raised significant amount of money in a very different way than others. There's a certain way he does his funding blitz, and there's a certain email he sends to people who are interested in investing in it. He will open all this up to the founders and have a discussion. And for the ones that fits what they do, that's great. For others, it was just another experience to network and know people from the ecosystem. So that's the third thing. And then the last thing is the work that's done within the pod. So on a weekly basis, the MD and the CEO of Ignite are integrating all of this together with the founders. And we had multiple sessions where, for example, we sat in front of a founder and a CEO of a startup and said, hey, you're great, Clark, but you don't fit to be a CEO. You love doing certain things in tech, or you love doing certain things in sales, etc. Let's help you find, a person that will join you and increase the value of your company, because you can focus on what you're really good at, and let's find someone that could take that role. So we'll do even that level of intimacy with the founders. So there's a variety of ways we do with them. Again, it's super intense, but the model is working. It's working really well. I think it's fairly transformational. And then one of the interesting things is how it works together back to Intel. What's the technical learning?
That was my next immediate question is, okay, what's in for Intel? Because again, you're giving a lot of value to this company.
So as I said, this is not philanthropy and this is not marketing. This is a business.
Yes.
So there are a variety of ways that this pays back to the company, and Intel is managed with OKRs, right? It's everything needs to be measured, and we need to show the value of what we do back to the company, etc. So there are a variety of ways that it pays back. So one of our, for example, batch one Tel Aviv startups, a company called Granulate, came to me with $4.5 million, 5 people. Intel acquired them a couple of years later for $650 million, according to the press. And they're front and center to our software strategy. A pivotal component of our software strategy is Granulate. If you look at, we did investments in, I think, 3 of the companies. Our Intel mentors are producing these deep technological documents. We have a repository of data. What do we learn about the world, right? What can we teach Intel about what's happening in the world? So there are a variety of ways that this pays back. One of the other ways that, or the additional ways that this is important, is the change of culture. You've been dealing with corporate innovation for a while, Alberto, and one of the biggest challenges that we're facing in these large corporations is, how do you reinvent the culture? How do you change the culture? And that's not easy. It's actually pretty hard. The interesting thing with Ignite has about 300 mentors from within Intel. So people that through the engagement with the startups see things in a very different way that they've seen them before. We just had a meeting where my boss, so Greg Levender, met with few of our mentors. And one of the mentors told him that she divides her 20 years at Intel to 18 before Ignite and the 2 since she started with Ignite. It changed completely the way she works. And there are a variety of examples of how we've changed the way the different teams at Intel work and the way they see the world and their understanding of things out there. So it's a multifaceted tool, and it serves multiple parts of the company, and we're trying to put all of this together to show the value, of course.
And again, you mentioned then one of the company that passed through the program has been acquired. There are other examples of acquisition by Intel, and there are other examples of startups that exited with other companies. Where again, you can probably invest in a few, acquire a bunch of them, collaborate. You mentioned the support they're giving to the AI cloud with some of them, but probably most of the value goes to companies that actually they don't work with you or they don't get an immediate value. But probably, again, what I was listening to what you were saying is the fact that they are spending some time with you and with Intel, give them their level of intimacy of the strategy, technology of Intel, that probably might spark some potential opportunity of collaboration. That's probably might be the value having a bunch of top-class companies working with inside your premises together with you, and then maybe something happens. It's probably less, as you've mentioned, the traditional accelerator. But we have this problem come over and help us with is we take the best of bread, get them for a period of time. We open our approach, our strategy, our technology. We support you to do the best that you need to do to be a company, and maybe something might happen. So this is probably the two different approaches. Or I'm wrong somewhere.
No, you're right. But there's also another understanding that people must understand about this, the ecosystem and working with startups. A startup is a very time-bound entity. Startups go away fast. Either they get acquired, they shut down. Most of them do not succeed. It's something that just evolves super quick. The founder is not. The founder is something that stays for a long time. And they may start another startup. They may go to work for another company. They may be acquired by a partner or a company we can work with. The investment in these top founders, in these top tech transformers, is highly, highly valuable for many, many years. So even if that specific startup, we may not have been successful in doing something specific with them. We may have learned something about the world through engaging with them. We probably built a better relationship with the VC that invested in them because we created value for the startup. But we created another ambassador, another top technology leader that now thinks that Intel is actually more innovative than people think. And he met a bunch of people at Intel that are actually fast moving, and they could get, excuse my English, they could get shit done. So that's critical. And that's the understanding that the atomic unit that we're working with is not a startup. It's an entrepreneur. It's a developer. It's someone that is going to do it again and again and again. Or if they exited, they may acquire companies, they may invest in companies. We want to be part of that, right? And so it's way beyond the specific short-term startup Intel engagement. And that goes back to my original discussion on that research. It's not about this single transaction. It's about a long-term, deep relationship. It's a very different approach.
Again, I was writing it down because that would be the opening line when I will remind someone else about our conversation. I think you made a very, very good point. Is again, the atomic unit is not the startup, are the founders, and obviously, in order to get value out of this principle, you need to attract the best of the best. Yeah. Because again, if you're working with bad quality material, again, you create not exciting value. You might be helping, actually. Again, there is a lot of effort in that direction, but they're not particularly able to produce value down the way. But I think you made quite a point. And that explains why you're probably not getting any equity from these companies. You're just supporting them because you're interested in building up the relationship. Obviously, the complication of such an approach that you need to perform top again, because the quality go where quality is, excellence goes where excellence is. The moment that your program goes down a notch,
Exactly.
you're done.
Exactly. And our NPS is 93 or 96, depends on the location. So it's super high. People are super happy with the value, although it's very hard. It's a lot of work that they need to invest in their own startup together with us. But it's the point of not taking equity. Look, what I figured out many years ago, that holding small equity in hundreds of companies is not value, because at the end of the day, most of these companies are going to go away. That's the reality of startup world, right? Even if you pick the best ones, on an overall on a big scale, most of it is things you're going to write off. But we have an opportunity. Whenever we want to invest, we may pay a little bit of premium, but we'll know better what we're getting into. The company would know better if they want to do a deal with us or someone else. And then it's not that we've just winged it and we thought this is the right direction. We know it's the right direction, and the company knows this is the right partner. So it's a very different approach, and I would even say it's a smarter way of getting equity versus just spreading it too thin on many companies.
Yeah, because again, you pay premium, but you pay premium on something that you find value rather than getting dimes or nickels out of. And then, by the way, the secret of the Y combo of the world is that they're just investing everything and they follow up the investment down the way. Because that's the problem. If you just invest the first round and let it go at the end, yes, might be a unicorn, but you take probably a small part of that. The real question, and I'd like to get your opinion in, because it's a topic that I'm also struggling with many of your colleagues, many corporates. And you say we pay premium. Many corporates, most of the time, accuse their own CVC arm because they are inflating the value of companies might be interesting for an M&A play. So actually, we are paying more because of you, rather than say, actually, you de-risk the investment, you help the company to become on the level, now it's a level for interest. So can you help our audience to elaborate the concept is that if something is strategic, at the end, the price paid is not that relevant. Actually, the money that you waste going after small things is probably the real problem the company do have. Because again, this part, logically, everybody is on board, and then when they come to concrete example, they pull back.
Yeah, but as you said, the value here is strategic. Yes, of course, we want to, as with our investments and with everything we do, we want to make sure we don't throw away money if we don't have to, and we want to be highly effective in the way we use the funds. But we need to be strategic, right? We need to help get faster to the future that we need to get to in order to win in the market. Right, we all want to win against the competition. We want to make sure we're on the right directions, and we have to cut that short when we have to, and get the deal done and make it happen. Because again, the business moves super fast. So as you mentioned, it's strategic, it's important, and we will help the company make the right decision to move as fast as possible. And as mentioned with some of my examples, we've changed the company based on these decisions. And yes, you can go back and say, well, you paid too much, you didn't pay too much, etc. It's been transformational for us.
Yeah, because at the end, strategic investments might be expensive, but they have a big outcome that is the survival of the company. While non-strategic things may be cheap, but at the end doesn't have that much. So Zack, it's been a very, very insightful conversation, at least for me. Again, congratulations again for the work that you guys have been doing over the years with Intellignite. And that's the reason, again, our audience can understand the reason why Intellignite has been awarded among the Corporate Startup Stars 2023 for this novel way of reshaping a model that actually is we are seeing fading away, that is model of accelerators. But the way you're doing, focusing on quality, focusing on founders rather than having a transactional startup driven approach, I think is the reason why your program is shining, is one among the corporate startup stars that we are celebrating. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we position ourselves as co-founder as a service, and not as a corporate as a service. It's a co-founder as a service, and we act like co-founders of these startups, not as board members, not as investors, not as employees, but actually as co-founders, which in our case, not taking equity, but at that level.
Is the co-founder, yes, it's probably is the part of value that you show by supporting critical moments that might pay off eventually later on.
Yeah.
And eventually and later on, two concepts that you described in our conversation might happen also, maybe one or two startups after, and might eventually, because probably we never know. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alberto, and thank you everyone for listening.